Let me just check if this works. Okay. So an observational study on sleep deprivation. And you'll see in the abstract that I did my paper on human experimentation. So you might be wondering, how are the two connected? How is sleep deprivation and human experimentation connected? Excuse me. So I had an interest in the topic of human experimentation. And when I say that, it kind of like throws people off a little bit, because human experimentation, the two words, have a pretty negative connotation, And that basically comes from the Nazi prison experiments. And I argue that that is when modern day human experimentation really begins, after the Nazi prison experiments. So I had an interest because of its mysteriousness, because I have a lot of questions when I read about it, when I learned about it in history. It was like, why were they doing these things? Like, what pushes people to do such horrendous things to each other? Okay, so I have a picture of clay, because like clay, sleep deprivation was my canvas. It was my pliable medium in which I could conduct my own human experiment. So that's a metaphor right there. Pros of a sleep deprivation study. It's safe, easy to resource, available, and real-world application. So what I mean by safe is, I knew I was going to do a human experiment, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do it on. So some things I had in mind were testing of drugs and treatments. So everyone here is familiar with Ritalin, Adderall. I wanted to see, well, everyone uses, not everyone, but like a lot of kids use Ritalin, Adderall. I want to see what really is its effect on an academic career. Other things were caffeine, maybe caffeine on running or something like that. But then I came to the conclusion that it was putting something into my body. It was unhealthy. And sleep, although, depriving sleep is unhealthy, I wouldn't put a chemical or something into my body and jeopardize my health. Now, easy to resource. I like to say sleep is cheap. And so, it's easy. Everyone sleeps, and you do it every night. And although you can go pretty expensive when you get machinery, like EEGs, MRIs, brain scans, all that, doing tests at home are just as effective, as I'll show you. And so it's easy to resource. Available, like the drug, going back to the drug and drug testing, sleep, everyone does it. So I didn't have to go out and get, energy drinks or coffee. I didn't have to get Ritalin or Adderall. And real-world application, I wanted to take something, and when I present it in front of an audience, it would inspire you guys to, maybe change your life a little bit and maybe see, the faults of staying up late. So first, books. I read a lot of books. A lot of the ones on the bottom are actually about human experimentation. The ones at the top are about sleep. A lot of internet articles, watched a couple of videos, and it led me to the effects of sleep deprivation, scientifically proven effects of sleep deprivation on the mind and body. So first off is increased irritability. And I like that picture because it basically personifies all of us when we're angry. She's about to say the F word, as you can tell. And what it is increased irritability to me is important because it affects you. And I mean you, not as in, your health risks, but as in how people perceive you, how you perceive the world, how you deal with situations, how you handle relationships, social situations, how you talk to coworkers, your boss, employees. So increased irritability. Impaired memory. And this was important to me because as a student, memory is how you retain information. And as much as people like to say, memorizing isn't the key to learning something, and as true as that might be, but for something like foreign languages, like learning Italian, you have to learn verb conjugations, irregular verb conjugations, grammar. If you're studying Italian literature, there's key plot points and character names. So memory is impaired. Decreased focus and attention. And this is I put this in for you guys, because I'm assuming everyone here drives, right? And maybe you've heard about how sleep deprivation affects driving, and in a pretty negative way. So Harvard Medical School in 2010 did a survey, and they asked, have you ever driven while drowsy? 54% of people said yes. Now 28% of people have actually admitted to falling asleep while driving. Now to put that in perspective, 100,000 accidents occur every year because of drowsy driving, as I like to say. And 4,550 result in deaths, and 40,000 result in injuries. Decreased optimism and sociability. And this kind of relates to the irritability part. I always feel like if it affects you and how people perceive you and how you deal with situations, that might be more important than anything, Because if you're not getting enough sleep at night, suddenly someone cuts you off in traffic or something, and you lose it, you lose your temper, or your kids, they don't clean their room, and suddenly you lose your temper. Now, decreased optimism and sociability, I also want to talk about how, as humans by nature, we overestimate our abilities at doing things. And you can call it confidence, you can call it arrogance, but by nature and I guess evolutionarily, it's a benefit. Because if you don't have the mental, you don't put yourself in a box, you can do better at things that you wouldn't normally know you could. So in AP Psych, Joel taught us that there was once an experiment where there were two groups of women, right? 50 people in Group A and 50 people in Group B. Now they were taking a test to compare women's scores to men's scores. In Group A, they told the women that they were going to do worse than men. And in Group B, they told the women they were going to do better. They were taking the same test. And at the end, the ones in Group B, as you would imagine, did better, and the ones in Group A didn't. They do as well. Now, body. Increased blood pressure. Increased blood pressure or hypertension has been known to lead to heart attack, aneurysms, stroke, and kidney failure. Now, in the United States, deaths from all heart disease deaths from all heart diseases is, there's more deaths from heart disease than there are in all forms of cancer combined. Sorry that I kind of botched that. To put in perspective as well, stroke is the number 3 leading cause of death in women and the number 4 leading cause of death in men. Increased food consumption. And there's a lot of theories. The most widely accepted theory is that sleep deprivation causes increased food consumption because there's these receptors in your brain and they're more open to signaling for foods high in lipids and high in calories. But for me, in my own experience running these tests, I realized it was simply just you're awake for longer. There's more time to get hungry, there's more time to eat. And that's why there's things like midnight snacking, and that's why Wendy's and Burger King are open 24 hours a day. So even if, let's say, you weren't eating fast food and you were just eating food, in a sense you were increasing your caloric intake and thus increasing food consumption. And increased food consumption can lead to obesity, and obesity has a whole host of other health risks. Decreased cardiovascular efficiency. And this was important to me personally because I used to run cross country and I ran track, and I wanted to see, well, is my performance being affected by my lack of sleep? Am I running subpar or substandard? All right, so to monitor the effects of sleep deprivation, I created a study, and here it was a 6-week study. And it starts with week 1 is baseline, which is just normal sleep, 6 to 8 hours. Week 2 is 1 hour deprivation every night. Week 3, baseline again. Week 4 is 4 to 5 hours a night of sleep, 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night. Week 5 is baseline, and week 6 is baseline as well. So in all my results you see in a sec, I average the 4 baseline weeks together, and then I have a special dedicated place for the 1 hour deprivation and the 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night. So mental. I wanted to test word recognition, memory, creativity, and logical thinking. And to me, memory is the most important because it was one of the effects, as I mentioned. And also, as a student, I want to see, how's my academic career being affected by not getting enough sleep. And here I cite a really important lab report for me because in this lab report, these 3, they did 5 mental tests and 3 physical tests. And so I did 4 mental tests and 3 physical tests. And my physical test, the only overlapping is the blood pressure. But for my mental cognitive test, I actually take 4 of theirs and I tweak it a little bit for my own study. Mental tests. Test 1 is word association and affiliation. So 12 pairs of words are given to the test subject. 6 of them associated, 6 of them unassociated. So examples of associated are sun and moon, and unassociated is cheese and gluteus maximus. And the test subject has 1 minute to look at the 12 pairs. After the minute, there's a 5-minute period of testing where, after the 5 minutes, you see how many you can recite of the words. And so here's my data. Results. Baseline week average is 9 pairs, which is roughly 75%. 1 hour deprivation is 6 pairs, which is half. And after 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night, it was 5 pairs. So you actually see I decrease in the amount of pairs I can remember. Test 2, the Halens Test. The Halens Test tests logical thinking, creativity. And what the Halens Test is 10 sentences are given to the test subject and they're incomplete. They're incomplete in a way that they coerce and kind of imply an answer. So when you read it, you immediately think of something. So one of the examples I gave later is a cheeseburger is different from a hamburger because a cheeseburger has cheese. Now, the first 5 are answered logically and the next 5 are answered illogically. And it's key that the sentences coerce an answer because the illogical part, it gets kind of funny when people are trying to rush. And obviously, an immediate answer comes to mind, but you have to ignore it and you have to continue. So here are my logical examples. Like I said, the cheeseburger. Illogical examples, a dog meows. Results. So my baseline week's average, it took me 45 seconds to complete this test. 1 hour deprivation is 38.9 seconds. So you actually notice I did better from the 1 hour deprivation. 4 to 5 hours a night, it goes to 51 seconds, which is 6 seconds slower than my average. Test 3, verbal fluency. So verbal fluency is actually a test given to a lot of young children, pre-K, kindergarten, first graders. And what it is the test subject is asked to name as many animals as they can in a minute. So here you see, baseline week's average was 30 animals I can name in a minute. 1 hour deprivation was 29 animals, and 4 to 5 hours a night was 27 animals. And lastly, the most important test to me was a short and long-term memory. And you see I put a star there because that is actually where I tweaked the test from the original lab report. And I'll try to explain it, but it usually takes at least twice for me to explain it. A list of 10 words, 10 random words, different parts of speech. Could be a verb, an adjective, a noun. Could be singular, could be plural. I'll give them to the test subject. The test subject has a minute to look at the words, and then after the minute, the list is put away, and there's a 5-minute period, a testing period. After the 5 minutes is up, they're asked to recite as many as they can. Now, where I tweaked it is I added another minute before going to the long-term 20-minute section. So after the 5 minutes of reciting what words you knew, you get the list again for another minute, and after that minute is a 20-minute testing period. Now, the reason I added that minute is I was doing test runs and test trials before I actually decided what test I wanted to use. And doing this one, I was working on this test with my friend Jordan Matthews, and I gave her the test. And at the end of the 20 minutes, she couldn't remember any of the words. And it wasn't even that she was sleep deprived. And then I took the test myself and I realized I couldn't remember any of the words either. And so that wasn't really useful to me because I couldn't get any lower. I was expecting to go lower and I was already at 0. So I added the minute. And you'll see from my results, actually long-term, I can remember all 10 words. So baseline week's average, short-term after 5 minutes is 6 words. Long-term after 20 is 10, all 10. 1 hour deprivation, the short-term is 5 words. Long-term is 9 words. 4 to 5 hours a night, short-term 4 words. Long-term 8 words. Now, physical tests. I want to test muscular strength. And muscular strength is important to me because I've been working out for 4 years. And I wanted to see, well, there's a lot of theories about if you don't get enough sleep, you're actually not growing. And your muscles grow when you're sleeping. And all the other things, I wanted to see, well, what really is it? Like, am I sleep deprived? Am I still building muscle at the same rate that I would be if I was getting enough sleep? Cardiovascular endurance, as I mentioned previously, I used to run. So I want to see, what are the effects of sleep deprivation on running? And then blood pressure. Blood pressure actually high blood pressure runs in my family. And also with the mentioned all the diseases and all the conflicts that can cause, I want to see, well, what are the effects on blood pressure? So physical tests, running. To test cardiovascular endurance, I jogged 1.3 miles and then ran 1.3 miles. Now after the jog and the run, I would measure my heart rate, and I would time how long it took for my heart rate to get back down to resting heart rate. And my resting heart rate is 55 beats per minute, but actually I chose to use 75 beats per minute instead because I would measure my resting heart rate in the mornings, and when you measure in the mornings, you haven't done any activities, you just woken up. It's at the lowest it can be, and it would take too long to get all the way from 55, and I had to run the 1.3 right after the jog. So here are my results, and there's a lot of data. I know it's kind of messy, but the best way to look at it is if you look vertically at the 3s, and I'll kind of go into it. So my baseline average is 9:06 to jog, 9:37 is after 1 hour deprivation, and it was 8:51 to jog from 4 to 5 hours a night. And the data is kind of wonky because it's kind of hard to define jogging. And for me, jogging has always meant running but still able to talk. And that becomes problematic because you can kind of shuffle and still be able to talk, or you can push yourself pretty close to running and kind of talk as well. So jogging, just got mixed up. I didn't really, at the same time, it wasn't like I was jogging at the same pace every time. So, but if you look at the running, running is actually you pacing yourself to run 1.3, and you can run it as fast as you can without taking any breaks. So if you see, my average is 8:11 to run. After 1 hour deprivation, it's 8:13, and from 4 to 5 hours a night, it is 8:25. So I gained 2 seconds from 1 hour deprivation, and then I put on 14 seconds for the 4 to 5 hours a night. Results for cardiovascular endurance heart rate. And just like my times for the jogging, the heart rates are a little mixed up too. It kind of looks like my heart rate is going down. So maybe you're thinking, well, is he getting, you know, more cardiovascularly fit? Actually, I think it's because when you're tired, you just can't push yourself hard enough. And if you can't push yourself hard enough, your heart rate is just not reaching the maximum levels. So if you see, after my run, it's 164 beats per minute. 1 hour deprivation is 160 beats per minute. And then after 4 to 5 hours a night is 156 beats per minute. Now, lastly is recovery. And it's a recovering time from my heart rate to get back down to resting, or 75 beats per minute in this case. So if you look at the data from this, it's actually, it's pretty consistent, it's pretty gradient. Baseline week's average is 210 after the jog and 345 after the run. 1 hour deprivation is 215 after the jog and 345 after the run. And then the 4 to 5 hours a night is 220 after the jog and 355 after the run. So if you see, it takes longer for me to recover. Now, blood pressure. Before I get into the data about blood pressure, I took my blood pressure on a Homopedics blood pressure monitor. And the Homopedics blood pressure monitor, at least the one I have, is, I wouldn't say horribly inaccurate, but it's a little bit, I don't think it works. So actually, these two numbers, the 1 hour deprivation and the 4 to 5 hours a night, is actually the average of 5 readings. And because my baseline weeks is, you know, four tests and 5 readings each time, it's actually the average of 20 readings. So baseline week's average is 120 over 69 millimeters of mercury and 55 beats per minute. I'll just say my heart rate is the same through all 6 weeks. 1 hour deprivation is 119 over 75 millimeters of mercury, and 4 to 5 hours a night is 125 over 71 millimeters of mercury. Actually, I think the best way to look at it is if you don't look at the 1 hour deprivation and you compare the baseline week's average to the 4 to 5 hours a night, my blood pressure does go up. Lastly, lifting, muscular strength, and growth. So I have a routine that I did all through the 6 weeks, Monday through Friday. It goes back and biceps, chest and triceps, legs, shoulders, and a day I call Weird Day, which is traps, forearms, calves, and abs, which is basically everything else. And the reason I have this 5-day rotation is it covers all the major muscle groups. So I didn't want to, be missing out on something, and maybe, not if I was neglecting, let's say, my legs, then on some of these lifts I wouldn't do as well. So deadlift, bench press, and squat. Now these 3 exercises, if you ask any football player or any athlete, and you say you can only do 3 exercises, which ones would you do? They always say these 3. They're compound movements, full body. Actually, in most weightlifting competitions, these 3 are the staple movements. So these are the ones that people compete in. So here's the deadlift, the squat, and the bench press. And here are my results. So if you can't see too well, the blue line is bench press, the red line is deadlift, and the green line is squat. So before I go into it, deadlift and squat actually, you see, stay consistent throughout. And I actually didn't go up in weight for either of the lifts. But for bench press, week 2, I got up to 195. And then week 3, I couldn't get back up to 195. And you'll see actually, week 3 and week 4, I was trying to get back to 195. And week 5, I finally did get back up to 195. And you see, it's consistent, and I highlighted the stars are actually the weeks I got deprivation. And a lot of people, when they measure a maximum lift, like how much weight can you lift on a certain exercise, they choose to do the 1 rep. And 1 rep is just 1 movement of the exercise. To me, that didn't seem like a complete movement, especially for bench press on the arms. So I thought, all right, so my maximum would be 3 reps. So if I couldn't do it 3 times, it didn't count, and I didn't add it, so here we go. Social. I have a picture of an interview between Craig Ferguson and RZA. Social, it was a problem for me. It was a challenge because I didn't know how to get data from it. And to me, data has always been quantifiable, like numbers, And for my lifts, for the words I can remember, it's always numbers. And for social, I didn't know how to put into numbers. I didn't know how to make emotions, into like a gradient scale. And even then, it would be subjective. So I thought, how about this? How about I take the situation of an interview, of a job interview, of a college interview, and it basically is just you have an interviewer and an interviewee. And the interviewer kind of pushes the conversation along, and the interviewee answers questions but adds to the conversation. And so, for my social test, behavioral and self-report, and so early morning chats with my mommy, What I would do is I would wake up in the morning, get breakfast, and over breakfast I would talk to my mom. And so I mentioned earlier it was an interview, but I didn't want her to have like a list of questions she would be asking me. I wanted just to flow from like a conversation one-on-one, you know? And I wanted to see, well, maybe if you're talking to your friends or your coworkers, how would it work if you were sleep deprived? So early morning chats with my mom. So here's a self-report I wrote. This was day 4 of 4 to 5 hours of sleep. I wrote, tired, so tired. I was at the gym today doing my normal training and my body was just not having it. I'm utterly and totally pooped. Every second that I'm not doing something energetic or distracting, I think a nap would be nice right now. I'm actually struggling to write this report now. My bed looks real comfortable. So summary. Mental, on all 4 tests, I did worse. So on the first word association, I remember less pairs. On the Halens Test, it took me longer to complete the sentences. For verbal fluency, I could say less and less animals as I got more tired. And for lastly, the short and long-term memory, it was less words remembered for both short-term and long-term. For my physical, running the 1.3 was an increase in time. The average was 8:11. I went up to 8:13 from 1 hour deprivation and 8:25 for the 4 to 5 hours a night. Recovery, it took longer for me to get back down to a resting heart rate. Bench, I had an eventual increase in weight, but it was, you know, as you saw, jumped up and down. And then squat and deadlift are consistent. And I wrote those that they're consistent. And, you know, you see, I put everything that changed, but I kept the squat and deadlift. Because muscle regeneration, when you're working out, you're tearing down your muscle fibers. And so when you tear down the muscle fibers, people ask, wait, so are your muscles regenerating? Like, you didn't go up in weight. Well, my muscles were regenerating, but they weren't regenerating fast enough that I could get stronger. I could do the same weight over, but I wasn't growing muscle. Now, blood pressure had an increase, and social, I guess I could say I was just tired. So as I conclude, before I end this, I just want to say, in the beginning I mentioned that maybe after watching this presentation, you would think, next time there's Super Bowl Sunday or Oscar Sunday, you turn off the TV and maybe get that extra 1 to 2 hours of sleep. Because sleep, I think, personally, is the easiest step to taking a step towards a healthier life for mind, body, and spirit. And so I would like to say thank you for coming, and I hope you had as much fun as I did.
We have time for Q&A.
A question about the cognitive tests.
Mm-hmm.
Who was administering those tests to you?
I did it with my partner, Stephen Patton. So Stephen Patton also did a study on sleep deprivation. So we shared a lot of the same tests. So cognitive tests were the same. I think he had an extra physical test. I'm not too sure, but he also did the lifts and the running and the blood pressure.
It was just one subject who was undergoing the deprivation?
Yeah.
And that the period was sort of -2?
So what it was 1 hour deprivation. So off of the baseline, which is 6 to 8, I usually slept 8. I didn't want to sleep 6. So it was 1 hour off that, which is 7. And then the other week, so week 4, was 4 to 5 hours a night.
Did you measure was it 4 lots of the time or 5 lots of the time?
It was 5 lots of the time.
So I had a question about sort of the technique and analyzing the data. Like, what criteria did you use to decide, all right, this is sufficient data for me to draw a conclusion? Or, at what point did you say, all right, this looks like a trend versus this just could be random?
I guess, yeah, so my summary was all the things that I thought had trends, and the things I neglected to put in there were the things that had, like wonky data or the numbers all messed up. So I guess if I saw, I guess I expected myself to get worse in most of these, and if I did see myself getting worse, I put it in there. But if I didn't, and if the numbers were hopping around, I chose not to put it in my summary. So, make my conclusions.
In your research, did you learn about confirmation bias?
I took AP Statistics in junior year, and I wanted to highlight that this is a study and not an experiment. So the difference between a study and an experiment is that a study is just I'm observing. And so I'm not altering any changes. And if I don't alter anything and I'm not experimenting, my data is, you can't, I think it's like you can't assume correlation, and everyone knows correlation does not equal causation. So with all the data and everything I showed, it's key to remember that it's not actually like, you can't take that as fact, and what it shows, it might not necessarily be measuring sleep deprivation.
When you were doing this, did you kind of like block off a section of time to do your physical part and your mental part? Or did you intertwine them?
So mental tests were every morning I woke up, ate breakfast, went to train, so I did the 5-day routine. After I came home, it was doing mental tests. So after the mental test, I assigned a test every single day. The physical tests were all done on Sunday, so I measured Sunday morning. I would do my blood pressure and my heart rate, and then the running would happen in Sunday afternoon. So the testing occurred throughout the week.
What are you doing next year?
What am I doing next year? Studying mechanical engineering at Case Western Reserve University. Thank you.
I'm just wondering about the sleep part of it. When you knew you had to sleep 6 to 8 hours, or you knew you could only sleep 4 to 5,
Mhm.
did that upset your sleep pattern? Or
So what would happen was I chose to wake up at the same time every day. So if I was doing 4 to 5 hours a night, I would probably end up going to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. So, you know, I was waking up at the same time every day, but going deeper into the night as the weeks went on.
In connecting the ethics and the experiment, is there a version of limited sleep that would be unethical to do? Or how would you decide?
So
1 hour a night versus...
because I am the researcher and I'm also the test subject, I get to decide what I'm going to put myself through. But if you were designing a sleep experiment, oftentimes sleep experiments, and all experiments actually, are you have to take into risk versus benefits. So if it's too risky and the benefits are, you know, like in my informal presentation, Mr. McGrath said, what would happen if I drank 15 gallons of soda? If giving my consent to that, is that ethical? Well, I was thinking about it, and technically no, because we kind of know what soda does to the body, and 15 gallons is quite a lot. And so risk versus benefits, you really would just be adding to the whole pool of data that you already have, and you're risking someone's life, you know, you're risking his health. So risk versus benefits is something you have to keep in mind, but since I was doing it on myself, it was self-applied, I got to, you know, abuse myself a little bit.
What do you think would be effective techniques to maybe convince your peers about the risks of sleep deprivation? That's something I've been working on for years.
I guess, well, when I mentioned the effects of the irritability and sociability, I would, you know, emphasize that point more, because you're dealing with students, you're having relationships, you're talking to people, communicating. But I'd probably take out the focus attention part, because, you know, I put it in there for everyone here because I assumed you guys would drive, and I wanted to scare you guys into sleeping a little more. So I don't know, I guess for students, it would be more athletic stuff and less of the mental stuff, I guess you could say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.